Part 43. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 421. Sushang is right. If you really want to do something, you can always think of a way. As for whether this method is feasible or not, you have to do it before you know. Even if it doesn't work, at most it will only cost you some money. But as the crown prince of a country, Duanmu had great ambitions, but he did not have the courage to take risks. In the evening, a banquet was held in Guanyang Palace. 2 pure gold chairs with carved dragon patterns were placed side by side. Nan 11 and Rongyu ascended to the throne and sat on the high dragon chairs to accept the worship of dongling courtiers. Nan 11 was wearing a noble dragon robe and a thick fur cloak. She was holding an exquisite dragon pattern stove in her hand. The whole person was wrapped tightly and airtight. She didn't feel cold at all while sitting in the chair. Warm and comfortable. Rongyu was dressed in the ordinary robes of the regent, with a rare cloak on the outside. Although he had strong physical strength, Nan 11 was always concerned about his unhealed injuries and worried that he would catch the cold again. So he was forced to wear one more piece. Rongyu has always had the final say in major matters between the two of them, and Nan 11 has not interfered, but Nan 11 has always had the final say in small matters. But if we investigate it seriously, there is actually nothing major between them. As long as Nan 11 insists on something, Rongyu will have no room to resist, no matter how big or small it is. The main hall is spacious, with several princes and ministers headed by Xie Xiaofu, Prime Minister Liu, Prince Jing, and Prince Huai on the right side, followed by officials of the third rank and above of dongling seated according to rank. The left side is naturally headed by Prince Duanmu and Sushang, followed by envoys from the two countries. Delicious delicacies, wine, melons, and fruit snacks were continuously presented by the maids. At the beginning of the palace banquet, the palace dancers with graceful and exquisite dances filed into the hall. After bowing ying, they flicked their red silk ribbons and danced enchantingly. Their graceful and exquisite figures and light and graceful dance movements quickly attracted everyone at the banquet. The atmosphere heightened. The ministers sipped the wine and admired the agile dance of the dancers. The music echoed in the hall, making people happy both physically and mentally. Duanmu, wearing a black fur cloak, sat silently at the banquet and drank. His eyes occasionally fell on the dancers and quickly moved away, as if he was not interested in the beauty and dancing in front of him at all. Suchang admired it quietly, with a gentle curve on her lips. She looked graceful, calm, and elegant. All the ministers were silent. At the end of the dance, the dancers bowed respectfully and left, the music slowly faded away, and the hall returned to calm. I have been feeling unwell for the past 2 days and I have not been able to entertain 2 distinguished guests from afar. I feel really uneasy. Nan 11 smiled lightly. I hope Prince Duanmu and Prime Minister Su will be more considerate. Your Majesty the Queen is serious, Suchang said with a smile. Prime Minister Dongling and the First Assistant are warm and considerate in their hospitality. The other ministers also treat us like guests. I feel as if I are at home. I am particularly grateful for this. After a pause, besides, my biggest wish for coming here this time is to see Her Majesty the Queen and the Prince Regent. I also wish to congratulate the Queen on her enthronement. I wish Her Majesty the Queen and the Prince Regent their love as husband and wife, and I wish the country of Dongling to be forever strong and the country to be prosperous with stability. The country will last forever. Tisk. He really knows how to talk. Especially good at talking sweetly and belly sword. Nan 11 replaced the wine with tea and said with a faint smile, according to Prime Minister Su's auspicious words, Dongling will be prosperous and prosperous for a long time, and the country will be prosperous. The relationship between me and the regent will be as strong as a rock. We will support each other and create the glory of Dongling prosperity. When Suchang heard this, her hand holding the wine cup tightened imperceptibly, then she smiled and said, congratulations, raised the wine cup and drank it all in one gulp. Duanmu said calmly, the little king originally came here for the purpose of marriage, hoping to promote eternal friendship between Dongling, Dazhu and northern Xinjiang. Unexpectedly, it was just wishful thinking of the little king. The regent didn't seem to want to have a good relationship with northern Xinjiang. Mean. Nan 11 was silent for a moment and smiled lightly. If the two countries really want to have a good relationship, they only need to be friendly with each other. If they don't go to war, they will have good relations with each other. It does not have to be maintained through marriage. Duanmu said calmly, Xiao Wang has always believed that only marriage can give people the greatest trust. If Prince Duanmu thinks that good relations between the two countries must be based on marriage, he is bound to be disappointed. Someone at the table said lazily, the regent of Dongling came from the Zhou dynasty. Before he came to Dongling, he had a high position. Although Her Majesty is the Queen of Dongling, she was also the wife of the regent before this. With her status as the Prince of Zhou, how can she let other men get close to her wife? This is a special situation. Prince Duanmu should understand. Duanmu was about to speak when he heard a lazy voice say again, Prince Duanmu has also been married, right? If His Highness the Crown Prince feels that his wife can be shared with others, then I have an idea. The famous handsome boy in Dongling will also young master. Why don't we pick two outstanding ones and send them to the Crown Princess of Northern Xinjiang, which can be regarded as a marriage between the two countries. This should be able to show our sincerity. I wonder what the Crown Prince wants. As soon as these words came out, the whole hall was silent. Duanmu's face turned the color of pig liver visibly. He turned his head angrily and looked at the person who spoke, you put dash. When his eyes met Xiejin Liang's sarcastic eyes, he took back the word unbridled that he was subconsciously about to say, and said coldly, today's palace banquet, in what capacity is Mr. Xia attending? As we all know, the standards of palace banquets for envoys are extremely high, and Duanmu is the Prince of Northern Xinjiang, and Sushang is the first-rank Prime Minister of South Vietnam. Both of them have noble status, so those present today are all officials of Dongling third rank or above. Although Xiejin is the legitimate son of Xie Xiaofu, he does not hold a formal official position. What qualifications does he have to enter such a situation? Prince Duanmu doesn't know. Another young voice sounded at the banquet, with a bit of goodwill to explain and inform, Mr. Xie is the first chief steward beside the regent, the chief steward of the inner court, and the attendant of the regent. His rank is the first rank, so he is indeed qualified to attend today's palace banquet. After the voice fell, the huge hall fell into a strange silence. Everyone was stunned. The first chief steward, the chief steward of the inner court? When did this happen? How could they not know? Duanmu obviously did not expect to hear such a reply, and for a while he could not help but fall silent. What else can he say? The ministers of Dongling are not normal people. They are best at killing with one word. They talk nonsense with their eyes open, and they say it so calmly, as if it were true. Prime Minister Xia lowered his eyes and picked up the wine cup, sipping it slowly, and couldn't help thinking in his heart, is his son itchy recently, or has he been spoiled by him and has no law? He really has been showing off one after another, without even taking a break. I won't mention that he had taken in a few beautiful boys before and had a reputation as a gay man. After all, it was a reward from Her Majesty the Queen and could not be refused. Yesterday, he tore his face with the Su brothers in public, which made the children of the imperial family in the capital panic. It was understandable, because the second son of the Su family was so stupid that he speculated on the emperor's intentions in public and even said that the Prince of Huainan was a hostage, so he turned against them. But today he was so absurd that he even became the chief steward of the palace. Did he want the Xie family to have no descendants? The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 422. Xie Xiaofu felt a headache. Although old masters often say that a filial son emerges from a stick, he is a gentle scholar, and after becoming an extremely human minister, he learned to cultivate his moral character and never liked to use violence. Even if the concubine in the mansion makes a mistake, he is too lazy to do it himself and just leaves it to the guards in the mansion to deal with it. The extent of the punishment is based on the ninth young master's wishes. If the ninth young master is too lazy to take care of it, then life or death will depend entirely on the person who made the mistake. The creation of man. But he never touched this little Aju who was as precious as a pearl. But Xie Xiaofu put down his wine cup and pondered to himself, whether the whip caused more pain or the cane was more powerful. After going back tonight, he might have a good talk with Xie Jin. Mr. Xie, who was immersed in his thoughts, ignored the strange looks from around him. However, on this occasion tonight, the ministers all knew what was right and would not laugh openly because they wanted to be consistent with the outside world. The Prince of Northern Xinjiang and the Prime Minister of South Vietnam were more frustrated. Only then did I get happier. As for when the son of Xie Xiaofu's family became the first chief steward of the palace, well, let's ask him after the palace banquet is over. After a moment of silence, Nan 11 smiled lightly. The rules in Dongling and Northern Xinjiang are different. Who is qualified to participate in the palace banquet should not be decided by me and the regent. Is it possible that we need to listen to Prince Duanmu's opinion? This is well said. The ministers were shocked and nodded in unison. Her Majesty the Queen is absolutely right, Prime Minister Lu said with a smile. Her Majesty the Queen is the Lord of Dongling, and the rules should be decided by Her Majesty. Whoever Your Majesty says is qualified will be qualified. If Your Majesty thinks that anyone is not qualified, then even the powerful clan members are not qualified. The ministers were slightly awe-inspiring. Thunder, rain, and dew are all Your Grace. In just 8 words, it describes the absolute supremacy and irreversibility of imperial power. If the king favors someone, even a beggar on the street can enjoy glory. If the king dislikes someone, then the most respected minister will still fall into the abyss. The life and death of ministers, the prosperity and decline of families, are all determined by the king's thoughts. It seems that Xiao Wang's trip to Dongling is not a wise decision. Her Majesty the Queen does not seem to be happy about guests coming from afar. Duanmu Yu's face was pale, his expression was obviously a little uneasy, and his voice was a little more unhappy. So Xiao Wang plans to meet up and leave Dongling early tomorrow morning. I would like to say goodbye to Her Majesty the Queen and the Prince Regent. I am a weak woman who has lived in the house for a long time. After all, I am a bit narrow-minded. In fact, I don't really want to embarrass Prince Duanmu. Nan 11 smiled faintly, saying that the livestock was harmless. Northern Xinjiang and Dongling are thousands of miles apart. The road is long. There is no way to go back and forth, it's extremely hard. Now that His Royal Highness is here, please live peacefully in Dongling and let me fulfill my duty as a landlord. After finishing speaking, without waiting for Duanmu Yu's reply, he ordered, Xie Jin, starting from tomorrow, you will be responsible for taking Prince Duanmu and Prime Minister Su around the imperial city, so that the 2 distinguished guests can appreciate the customs of Dongling. Be sure to treat Prince Duanmu and Prime Minister Su. Prime Minister, please be polite. Xie Jin stood up and saluted, I obey your order. Your Majesty's kindness, the little king appreciates it, Duanmu Yu said in a calm tone, but because it is not easy to go back and forth, the delay on the way back and forth is long, so the little king should go back earlier. My father has been a little disobedient in the dragon body recently. The king has to go back to help his father solve problems and share government affairs, so I have no choice but to live up to Your Majesty's kindness. I'm really sorry. The same goes for me, Su Chang said. South Vietnam has been busy with the affairs of the court recently, and spring is coming soon after the new year. My emperor specifically asked me to return as soon as possible, and not to delay the important affairs of the government. Therefore, I am very grateful to your majesty for your stay. It's a pity that I could only live up to his majesty's wishes. It's really a shame. Really ashamed? Nan 11 smiled casually. Dongling is a dragon's pond and a tiger's den. It's easy to get in, but it's a little difficult to leave. Especially after offending her. She had long said that when she freed up time, she would take care of the two most popular envoys and let them know that things in this world are really not what they want. However, she hasn't even started cleaning up yet, and they are leaving? Where to go? Nan 11 raised her eyes and smiled lightly. Prince Duanmu and Prime Minister Su don't need to feel guilty. I am the one who should feel guilty. Su Chang was surprised. Your Majesty the Queen. The High Priest sent me a message yesterday, asking me to entertain the two distinguished guests well and not to neglect them, otherwise there will be disaster in Dongling. Nan 11 sighed, apologetically, I was really busy the past 2 days. Because I am not feeling well, I did not entertain you well. Please forgive me, Prince Duanmu and Prime Minister Su. As soon as these words came out, the ministers of Dongling looked shocked. There must be disaster? The words of the High Priest are oracles. You must not neglect them. You should really entertain His Royal Highness the Crown Prince and Prime Minister Su in the future. Oh, I have been negligent in the past 2 days. Please forgive me, Prince Duanmu. Prime Minister Su must not take it personally. Your Majesty, I think I can choose 2 beauties to serve Prince Duanmu. Prince Duanmu keeps his integrity and does not approach women easily. Don't make bad ideas. Duanmu's expression changed slightly and he looked at Su Shang involuntarily. Su Shang also frowned. The two looked at each other for a moment, and Su Chang was about to speak when Nan 11 said again, for the sake of the stability of Dongling, I am willing to keep you two here for a while. Please don't refuse, and you must let me entertain you well. Su Chang felt a little uneasy, but Your Majesty. This matter has been decided. Nan 11 made the final decision. Xiejin, if you dare to neglect them, I will let you go to the inner court and become a veritable general manager. Xiejin bowed, I will definitely obey the order and never dare to violate the holy will. Prince Duanmu, Prime Minister Su. Nan 11 raised her hand to indicate, eat and drink to your heart's content, you're welcome. Rong Yu was sitting on the chair, with a dignified and handsome face. In silence, he left today's scene completely to Nan 11's control. He didn't say much during the whole process, but when he heard Nan 11 say eat and drink to your heart's content, the corner of his mouth couldn't help but a smile broke out. Your Majesty the Queen. Situ Suanja stood up with a solemn expression and a cold tone. My emperor specifically told the prince that he must rush back to Kyoto in northern Xinjiang before the 15th day of the first lunar month. If there is any delay, His Royal Highness the Prince must bear the emperor's responsibility. So we have to leave Dongling early tomorrow morning. We can only accept His Majesty's kindness. Nan 11 was silent for a moment and said calmly, but the High Priest has said that I must keep you two and entertain them for a few days. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 423. As soon as he finished speaking, Duanmu's face suddenly darkened. Is Her Majesty the Queen trying to trap us in Dongling? Everyone here is not a fool. If you can't hear the simplest intention, it would be too slow. What does you must stay 2 of them and entertain them for a few days? Isn't it necessary to force them to stay in Dongling? Su Chang's expression was also a little worried, and she looked at Nan 11 silently. Prince Duanmu, there is no need to be angry. Nan 11 smiled lightly and said in a calm tone, the Crown Prince and Prime Minister Su traveled across thousands of mountains and rivers, traveling day and night. I was really uneasy because I did not entertain you too well. Your Highness, the Crown Prince, has been traveling all the way. It's better to rest for 2 days before leaving, otherwise my body may not be able to handle the traveling back and forth. As he spoke, he sighed, it's the New Year's Eve now. If we encounter mountain bandits who seek wealth and murder on the way, if something happens to Prince Duanmu and Prime Minister Su, I can't explain it even if I'm full of words. No. Duanmu's heart trembled for a moment, and his tone was cold. Your Majesty, the Queen is too alarmist. Of course I'm not alarmist. Nan 11 smiled lightly, because the lessons learned from the past are still there. The whereabouts of Prince Yayan of the Shu Kingdom have not been found so far. Prince Duanmu should know whether he is alive or dead. As soon as the words fell, Duanmu's expression suddenly changed, and he couldn't say a word for a moment. This is a threat. A blatant threat. Suchang's hand holding the wine cup tightened slightly, but the expression on her face remained unchanged. She smiled faintly. The kingdom of Shu may have found Prince yet. As far as I know, there is no news yet. Nan 11 shook his head slowly, with a trace of regret on his face. It's a pity that Prince Ye, the crown prince of the country, has been missing for a long time. For the sake of the stability of the country, the Emperor of Shu is afraid that it's time to establish another prince. It's just that Prince Ye didn't know who he offended, so he was so revengeful that his body couldn't be found, as if he suddenly disappeared from the world. It's really weird. After these words fell, the hall fell into dead silence again. The air was unnervingly still. Duanmu's face turned pale, and he suddenly felt cold all over his body, and his whole body froze like a stone sculpture. Regret and fear arose spontaneously at this moment. He suddenly realized that he probably shouldn't have come to Dongling at all. Duanmu was not a person who was easily frightened. However, Yayan's disappearance was indeed true, and his life and death were still unknown. Therefore, although Nan 11's words were mostly threatening, they actually made people uneasy. There is no doubt that Nan 11's words have set off a storm in his and Sushang's hearts, and an astonishing idea flashed through their minds at the same time. The disappearance of Prince Yayan of Shu is definitely related to Nan 11, to be precise, it is definitely related to Rong Yu. There was no news about Yayan on his way back to Shu from Dazhu. All the guards he brought with him were killed and no one survived. The spies sent by the Shu court searched for his whereabouts day and night, but so far they have not found any clues. If it was the Juxiao pavilion forces who took Yayan away. Duanmu pursed his lips and looked at Sushang silently. Both of them looked surprised and did not speak for a while. In fact, Nan 11's words not only horrified Sushang and Duanmu, but also made Dongling ministers feel awe-inspiring. Prince Ye of Shu Kingdom disappeared and his whereabouts are still unknown. This sentence alone may sound like nothing, but the information revealed in it makes people unable to stop thinking about it. Moreover, in this situation, it is impossible for Her Majesty the Queen to mention the disappearance of Prince Ye without any reason. Since it was mentioned, it was probably used to threaten and warn Duanmu and Sushang, so there are some unknown things hidden in it that require them to think deeply. Is it possible that the disappearance of the Prince of Shu is related to Her Majesty the Queen and the Regent? The ministers of Dongling were deep in thought. The more they thought about it, the more they realized that the couple Rong Yu and Nan 11 were really unfathomably close. No wonder they were able to crush all the royal family members when they first came to Dongling. Facing the unfamiliar environment of the court, facing the royal family members and courtiers of major aristocratic families, he was not afraid at all, calm and unfazed, not panicked, and did not fall behind in the slightest. He didn't even act deliberately to win over the courtiers. It seems as if being in power will automatically allow everyone to be used by them. However, the facts prove strangely that most of the courtiers are actually willing to be used by them. As soon as the decree came out, even Chief Xia and Prime Minister Lu bowed their heads respectfully, and their attitude of submission to the new emperor was not inferior to that of the former emperor. When Princess Feng came back, some ministers in the court who had expressed dissatisfaction quickly shut up. Now, Just a short time later, all the voices of dissatisfaction have disappeared, and the courtiers are in harmony and calm. Of course, half of the reason for this is attributed to the temple of priests, because the emperor recognized by the high priest should have won the hearts of the people. But at this time, they couldn't help but think that maybe Her Majesty the Queen and the Prince Regent had hidden their secrets before coming to Dongling. There must be a huge force behind them, so they were strategizing and confident. Everyone has different thoughts. The originally lively atmosphere in the hall cooled down little by little, and was shrouded in a sense of uneasiness. "Why aren't you talking?" Nan 11 frowned and looked at Duan Muyu, who looked puzzled. "Is Prince Duanmu unwilling to stay in Dongling?" Duan Muyu frowned. "Xiao Wang indeed. In fact, I don't want to force anyone." Nan 11 smiled lightly. "If Prince Duanmu insists on leaving, I won't force him to stay, but the weather is cold now, and the wind is biting all the way. If there are really vicious mountain bandits, I don't know if the envoys and guards brought by Prince Duanmu can protect the prince." Duan Muyu froze and unconsciously clenched the wine cup. "If your majesty is really worried, I have a suggestion," Xiejin said leisurely. "Isn't General Ling about to return to Dezhou? Your majesty can arrange for him to bring some people to escort Prince Duanmu and Prime Minister Su along the way. Although they are going in different directions, it is our duty to escort the distinguished guests. Once Prince Duanmu and Prime Minister Su leave the border of Dongling, General Ling will complete his mission. After leaving the border of Dongling, Prime Minister Su and Prince Duanmu will have nothing to do with us whether they live or die. Everything depends on their luck, and your majesty doesn't have to worry about them. I wonder if this is feasible." Adding fuel to the fire, the threat escalates. Killing the heart invisibly. Suchang suppressed her anger and anxiety, and spoke calmly. "This minister and Prince Duanmu are here with enough guards to protect us." "It's feasible," Rong Yu said calmly. "If Prince Duanmu and Prime Minister Su insist on leaving, Ling Fan can lead people to escort them along the way." Everyone raised their eyes in silence. Rong Yu sat quietly beside the Empress from beginning to end, with a calm and steady demeanor, and his noble and graceful eyebrows were deep and unfathomable, without any emotional fluctuations, so people couldn't tell what he was thinking. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 424. Duan Muyu didn't speak for a long time, but his expression was visibly green with anger. To be honest, he was not afraid of Ling Fan. He was protected by Sidu Suanju and the brave warrior masters from northern Xinjiang. He was not worried about what Ling Fan would do to him along the way. What he really worried about was the ubiquitous power of Juxiao Pavilion. But Ling Fan, the general of the Zhou dynasty, represents the position of the Zhou dynasty. If something really happened to him when he left the border of Dongling, Beijiang would definitely be held accountable. Then Ling Fan could say that he had an accident somewhere other than Dongling and had nothing to do with Dongling. Regardless of whether Duan Muyu was alive and dead like Yayan, the Prince of Shu, or whether he was silenced directly, Ling Fan could prove that he had nothing to do with Dongling, and certainly had nothing to do with Dezhou. Even if the Emperor of Northern Xinjiang didn't believe it, it would be impossible for one country to be enemies of both Zhou dynasty and Dongling at the same time. Duan Muyu is the crown prince of a country, and most of the soldiers in northern Xinjiang are not greedy for life and fear of death. But the situation is different now. The princes of northern Xinjiang are all brave and ambitious. If something really happened to him, the prince, his brothers would be too late to rejoice, and northern Xinjiang would immediately fall into a civil war against the prince. In order to stand up in front of the emperor, performance, you may propose to conquer neighboring countries, such as Zhou dynasty or Shu kingdom. Raising troops to fight means losing military power. With Sidu Suanju by his side, he has no skills. When the time comes, the military power falls into the hands of others. Regardless of whether Duan Muyu has a chance to go back or not, the final result will not be what he wants to see. Countless thoughts have flashed through my mind in just a moment, including ambitions, succession of military power, turmoil in the court, struggles for power, and ownership of the country. In the deathly silence, Duanmu finally suppressed the anger in his heart and said calmly, "Her Majesty the Queen's kindness is difficult to refuse. It would be a bit unreasonable for Xiao Wang to refuse again and again. Since the High Priest has prophesied beforehand, Xiao Wang the King is more respectful than to obey the order, and is willing to be a guest in Dongling for a few days, but it will inevitably disturb Her Majesty the Queen." The corner of Nan 11's lips raised a hint of joy. "Prince Duanmu is polite. It is my duty to entertain foreign envoys, and it is not a bother." As he said that, he turned to look at Sushang, Prime Minister Su. Sushang put away the stiff expression on her face, naturally raised a warm smile, nodded and said, "I will listen to Her Majesty the Queen's arrangements. He who knows the current affairs is a hero." Nan 11 smiled lightly, her voice still gentle and harmless. "In that case, I will thank you for your extra thought. It is my honor to have your Majesty's trust." Xiejin bowed. "I will not disappoint His Majesty and will do my best to entertain these two distinguished guests." I don't know why, but after saying these words, Duanmu shivered. He felt that he must have been so nervous that he was hallucinating, but for a mere son of a chief minister who had no official position, what tricks could he pull off? Thinking like this, he couldn't help but pick up the wine cup and take a deep sip of wine. Naturally, a warm exchange of greetings ensued, delicacies and fine wines were served non-stop, and the monarch and his ministers drank to their heart's content. It seemed that the guests and hosts really enjoyed themselves. Duanmu and Sushang only occasionally showed anxiety and gloom on their faces, but they inadvertently revealed that their moods were not as good as they showed. The banquet in Guanyang Palace was in full swing. At this time, somewhere in the secluded inner garden of the palace, someone was complaining with tears in his eyes. "My father doesn't know that this couple from Zhou dynasty are ambitious and narrow-minded." As soon as they ascended the throne, they couldn't wait to suppress the Wei Palace. They were afraid that Yanner's existence would threaten their status, so they made any excuse to kill Yanner. He was imprisoned in the prison of the Ministry of Punishment, and Yanner was deprived of his position as the heir apparent. "Isn't this going to force us to die? I beg my father to make the decision for me." The old emperor, who originally thought that after abdicating the throne, would be able to relax and enjoy his old age, was now reclining on a large soft couch, holding a volume in his hand. After listening to King Wei's hysterical complaints, he said calmly, "Is it true or false that Yanner raped a girl from the town's official family?" King Wei was opening his mouth to prepare for another heartbreaking howl. After hearing these words, his expression suddenly froze, and all the expressions condensed on his face for a while. The sadness with tear stains on his face looked particularly ridiculous. The old prince said calmly, "How is the current situation of the daughter-in-law of Zheng Guogong?" "It's not bad." King Wei mechanically found his voice, and then said in a panic, "I have tried my best to treat him, and he is fine now." "Yes," the old prince said calmly, without any special mood swings. "In that case, you should go back first and let Su take good care of the girl and stew more tonics. The girl is fragile and should not be careless." King Wei knelt on the ground, his eyes shocked and disbelieving. "Father, Yanner is still in prison, doesn't his father care? Yanner has made such a big mistake. He should be taught a lesson." The old Tai Wang's voice was a little colder and more majestic. "When he is released from prison, let him shut up in the house and think about his mistakes. Don't do it again. Come out and show off." King Wei's face turned pale. He came here tonight with high hopes. He did not expect to get such a result. He was so panicked that he didn't know how to react. He thought that his father loved Yanner the most. He would be angry after hearing how wrong you and Nan 11 treated Yanner. Even if he didn't help them vent their anger, he would at least let Yanner out and let their family live during the new year. Reunion. However, go back. The old queen frowned slightly. I have been trying to break the fate of the Queen of Dongling in recent years, so I have always been more tolerant of the Prince of Wei's mansion and yandere. I have always turned a blind eye to what you do in private, and I don't want to investigate too much, but it is God's will after all. The Prince of Wei's face turned pale and blue, and he was stiff like a stone sculpture, unable to move for a long time. The High Priest is wise. How can we easily violate the destiny set by Dongling since its founding? The old queen sighed, her voice already unable to conceal her old age. Now the facts have once again proved that even if the Empress's accession to the throne is not in line with my wishes, it is very much in line with the will of God. The new Empress of Dongling is more suitable to be the Emperor than Yandere, isn't she? The King of Wei was as pale as paper. Father. In the future, restrain your arrogance. The old queen glanced at him and his eyes fell back on the book. I am old, and I am powerless to protect anyone. Now you can only protect yourself if you stay in peace, otherwise you will die. The King of Wei seemed to have been drained of all his strength. His face was pale and he couldn't say a word. The last glimmer of hope was shattered. The old queen's words made him completely panic, and fear spread from the bottom of his heart. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 425. The King of Wei has always felt that the kingdom of Dongling will belong to Xianyuanyan in the future. Xianyuanyan is his son, and the kingdom is equivalent to the Wei Palace. Before Nan 11 and Rongyu came to Dongling, the Wei Palace had always been the residence of the crown prince. It was so noble that people could only look up to it. The civil and military officials in the court had to pay respect to the King of Wei and did not dare to be disrespectful in the slightest, for fear of offending the father of the crown prince and being punished after Xianyuanyan ascended the throne. So you can imagine how glorious the King of Wei and his wife lived in those years. But later, the emperor was not in good health, and the crown prince's health gradually weakened. The emperor listened to the words of the high priest and finally planned to take back Princess Feng, who was far away in the Great Zhou. The King of Wei realized the coming of the crisis. The crown prince was only the crown prince. No matter how favored he was, as long as he did not ascend to that position could be replaced at any time. But how could he allow it? The throne can only belong to Yandere. What qualifications do others have to compete with Yandere, the royal grandson of pure blood, for the throne? So he developed a strong hostility towards the outsiders Nan 11 and Rongyu, and opposed them everywhere. The resentment and unwillingness of being deprived of the supreme position drove him to be an enemy of Rongyu and Nan 11. He thought that his father doted on Yandere, and even if he did something he shouldn't do, his father would protect the Wei Wang mansion. He thought that with the foundation of the Wei Wang mansion over the years, the empress couldn't touch him at all. He thought that the outside empress and regent would definitely be rejected by the court officials, and they would have no place to stand in Dongling. Even if they got the throne, it would only be in name only. He thought. Many of his thoughts were shattered by the words of the old emperor tonight. The emperor will also grow old, and there will be times when he is willing but unable. The country changes hands, power changes, and the old emperor who abdicated actually chose to let go completely, no longer interfere in state affairs, and no longer protect his beloved grandson. This made the King of Wei feel uneasy. Seeing that he was out of control, the old queen sighed softly, put down the book in her hand, and said calmly, I know that he was wronged in the matter of Yandere, but this grievance was not given to him by Rongyu and Zi Chen, but by me. The fate of the Dongling royal family has always been there. It was me who insisted on breaking the fate of the female emperor's rule, so that Yandere became the crown prince, but the facts proved that such persistence was wrong. I was in poor health a few days ago, and Yandere's body was getting weaker and weaker. It was after Zi Chen came to Dongling that Yandere and I were relieved. Whether you admit it or not, this is enough to prove the fact that she is the daughter of the emperor. What kind of nature is Yandere, you know in your heart, I have heard about it over the years, and he knows better whether he is suitable to be the emperor's high priest. You are not young anymore, and I didn't say some things openly, but also to save you some face. Listen to my advice. Zikan and Ranjiao are not as narrow-minded as you think. If you and Yaner can be content from now on, they will not trouble you, and the Prince of Wei's mansion will definitely have a good end, but if you are stubborn, I can't save you. Looking at the King of Wei, he picked up the scroll on the side and said lightly, I have said all here, you can do it yourself. The King of Wei listened silently, not knowing what to say, and left in a daze, then got up and left. The back seemed to have aged a dozen years in an instant. The old emperor frowned slightly, turned his head and looked at his back, and sighed faintly. For decades as an emperor, he worked diligently, worked hard for the people, and asked himself if he was not ashamed of the people of the world, but in the matter of establishing a crown prince, he did make a wrong decision. If it weren't for the momentary thought, the King of Wei and Xian Yuanyan wouldn't be so unwilling and still unable to accept the fact that the throne has changed. But what does Yaner's vicious and violent nature have to do with the throne? Perhaps he should be thankful that he finally listened to the high priest's advice and took Zi Chen from Dezhou. Otherwise, if Yaner really became the emperor, the people of the world would really be in dire straits. At that time, he, the wise emperor of his lifetime, would become the sinner of Dongling. The King of Wei's request to see the emperor in the evening naturally could not be hidden from Rong Yu's eyes and ears. After the palace banquet, Nan 11 and Rong Yu just returned to Dajhan Palace and heard Yin Shuang report the matter. When she heard her talk about the King of Wei leaving the inner palace in a daze, Nan 11 was silent for a moment and smiled faintly. If the King of Wei is smart enough, he should know that the emperor is doing it for his own good. If he insists on dying, I am not interested in being a bodhisattva who saves all living beings. Rong Yu didn't react much to this. Whatever Xian Yuanyan did outside, someone would naturally report it to the emperor, and this was allowed by Rong Yu. The King of Wei thought that his father would protect his grandson as always, but he completely forgot that the Dongling kingdom had already changed its owner. Not to mention that the old emperor knew the current situation and had completely stopped asking about political affairs. Even if he really wanted to make a move, Rong Yu would not give him the opportunity. As soon as Nan 11 finished speaking, Yin Yu came in to report, Master, Mr. Chu is here. Because the palace banquet in the evening delayed Rong Yu's time to change the medicine, Chu Nanyi could only wait and come to change his medicine after Rong Yu came back. Nan 11 said, let Mr. Chu come in. Yes. Chu Nanyi quickly walked in with a medicine box. After the ceremony, he reported a piece of news, Your Majesty, when Xiejin asked me to come over to change the medicine for the master, he asked if he would allow the boy that Your Majesty gave him to be sent to a brothel to entertain customers. Nan 11 was stunned, send him to a brothel to entertain customers. Is Xiejin going to destroy the flower? Chu Nanyi had a calm expression and nodded slowly, that's what Xiejin said. Nan 11 was silent for a long time, then turned to look at Rong Yu, are there many nobles in Dongling who like men? Rong Yu frowned slightly and glanced at Chu Nanyi expressionlessly. Chu Nanyi felt pressured by his gaze, so he quietly lowered his eyebrows and remained silent. This matter had nothing to do with him, he was just responsible for conveying it. It shouldn't be much. Rong Yu was unhappy, but his face showed no sign of it, but some people hide it deeply, and some people just seek excitement. You don't have to pay attention to these, he can do whatever he wants. Nan 11 nodded, well, anyway, the people are given to him, he really likes to do whatever he wants. Hearing this, Chu Nanyi wondered why Rong Yu was unhappy. Was he angry that he mentioned those forgotten beautiful boys in front of His Majesty, or was he angry that Nan 11 should not hear the unpleasant word receiving guests? But he was innocent. Even if the master wanted to vent his anger, well, he should directly vent his anger on the main person. Let's change the medicine first. Nan 11 reached out and took off Rong Yu's cloak. Is Kingling's medicine ready? Sun Yin smiled. Qingling will deliver the medicine after Master Chu changes the medicine for the prince. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 426. Rong Yu said nothing and walked into the inner hall silently. Chu Nanyi followed him into the inner hall, raised his hand to help Rong Yu take off his royal robe and underwear, and said in a respectful voice, although the lord is recovering from his injuries, his body is weaker than before. The weather is cold now. It's better not to go out in the cold wind. Rong Yu didn't say anything. He took off his snow-white undershirt, revealing his lean and strong back. Although the injury was indeed getting better, seeing the hideous scars on her back, Nan 11 couldn't help but twist her heart and said calmly, after entertaining Duan Muyu and Sushang, during this time before the year if there's nothing else important, just stay in the palace to recuperate and don't go out again. Rong Yu glanced at her, nodded slightly, held her hand and sat down on the brocade couch, with his back to Chu Nanyi so that he could change the dressing more easily. Silver Frost. Yin's Huang stood in the outer hall, my subordinate is here. Let Xiejin and Mo Ling'an come over. Yes. Nan 11 leaned on the brocade couch and looked at Rong Yu holding her hand. Why are they allowed to enter the palace so late? Don't you want to take care of Duan Muyu and Sushang? Rong Yu smiled lightly, since you have to take care of them, you have to make them hurt. It's best to remember the lesson for the rest of your life. Nan 11 was silent for a moment, raised her eyebrows and said with a smile, do you have an idea in mind? Rong Yu hummed and said lightly, Duan Muyu is afraid, so let his fear come true. Chu Nanyi lowered his head intently to deal with Rong Yu's injuries, automatically ignoring the intimate interactions between the two at any time, and thinking in his heart, with His Majesty being so dependent on His Majesty and unwilling to be separated for a moment, if the roles were reversed, then Nan 11 became what the civil and military officials of the Manchu dynasty and the world often called the evil concubine who brought disaster to the country. Unfortunately, that's not quite right now. Although the queen is the real master of the country, Rong Yu, the regent, always reminds his subordinates with actions that Nan 11 is the ninth five supreme being to whom they must be loyal. Anyone who dares to disrespect the queen should not be blamed for being ruthless. But they knew very well that the real power lay in Rong Yu's hands. These subordinates also surrendered to Rong Yu. Therefore, the position of Queen Nan 11 in their hearts is also equivalent to the demon concubine who brings harm to the country, but Dongling's ministers are more inclined to define the identity of the regent as the monster concubine who brings harm to the country. If Dongling will be in the future if social turmoil occurs, this argument will definitely become the most powerful reason to attack the regent. But Chu Nanyi still couldn't figure it out. Although he himself is not a romantic person, with Rong Yu's ability and power, as well as his supreme status, it is easy to override the imperial power of the 9 kingdoms in the world. Why is he so obsessed with this woman Nan 11? To the point where he personally supported her to the throne of God and was willing to be his minister? Chu Nanyi admitted that Nan 11 was kinder, gentler, and tolerant than many women from powerful families, and her appearance was also very beautiful. Her personality was frank and gentle, making people comfortable, without any scheming, smart, perceptive, and magnanimous. Well, it seems like there are quite a few advantages. Well, he had to admit that although his master's infatuation and persistence were rare among men, Nan 11 did have the capital to be cherished, and was indeed a rare good character among women. At least much better than those noble ladies from aristocratic families who claim that women should be well educated, gentle, and dignified. Just like the words he once used to describe Hong Ai and Fang Lanyi. The difference between pearls and fish. However, love in the world can destroy ambitions and make even the most cold and aloof people become softer unconsciously. Chu Nanyi lowered his eyebrows, didn't think much more, and concentrated on changing Rong Yu's dressing. Because the injury has improved and is much better than the initial condition, changing the dressing is no longer a difficult process. After changing the dressing, the crystal clear plaster is densely covered on the scar and solidifies naturally when exposed to the air. There is no need to wrap it again. Gauze. When Qing Ling brought the decoction in, Chu Nanyi was taking Rong Yu's underwear and putting it on for him. Qing Ling lowered her head and waited, automatically avoiding any scenes she shouldn't see. Bring over the decoction, Chu Nanyi said, turning to look at Rong Yu. Sir, after drinking this pill tonight, you can reduce the dose tomorrow. You still have to drink one decoction a day. The first half of the month. Nan 11 asked, does his injury still hurt? No wonder Nan 11 was so straightforward, it was because every time he asked Rong Yu, he said it didn't hurt, it was okay, and there was no need to worry. The more times he said it, Nan 11 really thought he didn't hurt. But when I changed the dressing every day, I saw with my own eyes that although the injury was getting better day by day, it was still shocking to the naked eye, and it would never be possible for it to heal so quickly to the point of no pain. Your Majesty, there is no need to worry. Chu Nanyi knew how to speak well. He could not only comfort Nan 11, but also praise his master very naturally. Although the injury looks scary, the master has an extraordinary will and is as strong as anyone else. The Lord doesn't care about this pain. Nan 11 was speechless for a moment. Sure enough, what kind of master brings out what kind of subordinates? None of Rong Yu's men are normal people. Seeing Rong Yu finish the bowl of dark soup without changing his expression, Chu Nanyi quietly packed up the medicine box and left, saying, I'm afraid Miss Yin's Huang may not know Xiejin's whereabouts at this time. I'll go look for it. Rong Yu said nothing. Nan 11 raised her eyebrows and smiled lightly. Will Yin's Huang not be able to find Xiejin's whereabouts? I'm afraid it's inconvenient for her to find. When Chu Nanyi walked out of the Dajhan Palace, Su Shi had passed, and a bright moon hung in the sky, casting white frost all over the ground. After the palace banquet was over, Xiejin, who was ordered to entertain the distinguished guests, invited Duan Muyu and Suchang to Qingfeng Pavilion. The original words were, the customs of the people in Beijiang and Dongling are different, and the beauties have their own styles. It seems a pity not to indulge in such a beautiful night. Duan Muyu didn't want to go at first, but he couldn't resist Xiejin's sneer, isn't Prince Duan Muyu not interested in women? If the crown prince doesn't even know how to enjoy beauties, it's too boring. Another way to say this is whether you have any hidden illness. How can a crown prince be suspected like this? Besides, it was too cold to sleep in the palace these 2 nights, so it wouldn't be bad to just relax. So he followed Xiejin into Qingfeng Pavilion, enjoying the brilliant lights, the melodious and graceful sounds of stringed instruments, and appreciating the styles of various beauties. The night in Qingfeng Pavilion is extremely charming and beautiful for many dignitaries. They can sit in a private room at leisure, order 2 beautiful and romantic beauties to accompany them, play music, drink tea, or when they are in a leisurely mood, they can draw a picture of mandarin ducks playing in the water with their hands and add a few poems, which can not only relax the mood of the day, but also create a kind of elegant mood. But the beauty tonight is a little different. Does Mr. Su like boys or girls? In the spacious and exquisite private room on the 3rd floor, Xiejin leaned against the brocade couch by the window, his slender white fingers gently stroking the soft hair of the beauty beside him, and looked casually at Suchang on the right seat, 2 beautiful boys first. Suchang smiled faintly, I didn't expect Mr. Xie to have such a hobby. Xiejin raised his eyebrows and smiled, This young master has no other skills, but when it comes to conquering beauties, I'm afraid no one in this imperial capital dares to compete with me. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 427. As he said that, he turned to look at the bright-looking girl next to him. Baby, do you think so? The beauty's red lips curled up, and her slender jade fingers painted with beautiful dandelion held up the wine cup, and brought it to Xiejin's lips in a charming way. What Juyu said is absolutely true. Looking at the entire imperial capital, who can be as good as Juyu? I have so many confidants. The new family is so fascinated by Master Ju that other men don't even want to take a second look. Xiejin held her hand and drank the wine gracefully. This little mouth can really talk. Duan Muyu sat on the left seat, and there were two beauties beside him who were serving him wholeheartedly. However, he was not as calm and comfortable as Xiejin, and he did not dare to drink the wine served by the beauties for fear that the wine would be poisonous. As for Sushang, he sat motionless like a gentleman, not even looking at the beauty Xiejin arranged for him, like Lu Xiaowai who was sitting calmly in her arms. Mr. Su, don't you like girls? Xiejin raised his eyebrows slightly, and his phoenix eyes naturally exuded 1,000 graces. Suchang was startled, but then he saw Xiejin clapped his hands. The door of the private room was opened, and two young men wearing light blue flowing robes walked in. They were both 15 or 16 years old. They were slender and beautiful, and their skin was as white as snow. They looked like as beautiful as a jade-carved doll. As soon as the two came in, they lowered their heads and knelt on the ground. Suchang's eyes suddenly shrank, and he stared at the two teenagers. The corners of his lips were pursed tightly, and anger swept over him, almost making him lose control on the spot. Xiejin actually sent the beautiful young man he brought from South Vietnam to offer to the queen to this brothel? Mr. Su, you know these two people, right? Xiejin glanced at him and smiled casually. I gave them nice names. One is called Yunwu and the other is called Yungziu. They will be called Yungziu when they receive guests in this building from now on. Name. Suchang could hardly control her anger. After enduring it again and again, she was able to restrain her almost out of control emotions. Mr. Xie, what do you mean? What's the meaning? Xiejin's lips curved slightly, and he motioned to the beauty beside him to pour the wine. Then he raised his eyes and looked at the two young men kneeling not far away. Xiao Wuer, come here. The boy kneeling on the left turned pale, pursed his lips, stood up, walked to him and knelt down in front of him. Bring the wine to Mr. Su, Xiejin said in a lazy voice. Remember, you will personally serve Mr. Su to drink this glass of wine. Yunwu looked at the wine cup in front of him, bit his lip and remained silent. What? Xiejin looked at him with a half smile but not a smile. Are you having fun with me? The young man trembled imperceptibly, but still lowered his head and remained silent. Xiejin chuckled, and unhurriedly pulled out an exquisitely shaped dagger. Turning his wrist, the dagger was unsheathed, and the sharp dagger blade was pressed against the young man's fair cheek. Such a pretty little face, what if two eyes are missing? Zi, what a shame. Xiao Wuer, do you want to try it? The young man's face turned pale, there was obvious fear in his beautiful eyes, and his slender body could not stop shaking. Suchang clenched her hands tightly and couldn't help gritting her teeth. What on earth do Mr. Xie want to do? Why is Prime Minister Su so anxious? Xiejin looked up at him and said in a leisurely voice, those who are disobedient must be taught a lesson, lest they don't know their identity and climb on top of their master to cause trouble. Do you think so? Duan Muyu said coldly, Master Xie, this is too much. Is it too much? Xiejin slowly put down the dagger, picked up the wine cup and handed it to the young man in front of him. The young man did not dare not to accept it, and took the wine cup tremblingly. Hearing Siejin say, "Obedious boy, Master Ju will do well love me, otherwise you can keep those tricks tonight," or gently stroking the young man's slender white jade fingers, Siejin smiled lightly, "These 5 beautiful fingers." The young man trembled in fright, shook the wine cup suddenly, and a few drops of the wine in the cup spilled on Siejin's hand. Siejin clicked his tongue, stared at the drink in his hand for a moment, and casually put his finger to the young man's lips. The young man was so shocked that he didn't dare to breathe. He carefully stuck out his tongue and licked the drink on his hand clean, his little face turned pale. Siejin smiled with satisfaction, "Go ahead." The young man did not dare to resist, so he turned around obediently and walked on his knees in the direction of Sushang. The beauty beside Siejin cleverly brought a jade basin, with a few flower petals floating on the clear water in the basin. She lowered her eyebrows to help Siejin clean his hands, and took several cases of snow-white handkerchiefs, and gently wiped Siejin's fingers. "Wipe clean thoroughly." Is it possible that when Prince Duanmu was in northern Xinjiang, he liked to manipulate the servants in the palace? Siejin leaned on the brocade couch and looked up at Duanmu. "How come I heard that Prince Duanmu likes to poach people the most? Eyes, chopping fingers, and also likes to plant poison into beautiful women's bodies." Duanmu's expression suddenly changed, and his eyes looking at Siejin were shocked and cold for a moment. "Don't have such a big reaction." Siejin's voice was calm and he always looked leisurely and lazy. The prince of a country should always remain calm, and should not express his emotions or anger, so that no one can guess his inner thoughts. Even if the sky falls and the earth collapses, the country is destroyed and the family is destroyed, he can't show any signs of losing his temper, but it seems that Prince Duanmu's cultivation is not strong enough at the moment, and he still needs to work hard. Duanmu's eyes were cold and solemn. The aura of Sidu Suanju beside him suddenly became fierce. His gloomy eyes were fixed on Siejin, as if he would kill him in the next moment. However, Siejin just raised his lips and smiled, with a pair of charming red and phoenix eyes. The air in the private room was terrifying, with a cold breath flowing through it, bringing a chill that made people tremble with fear. Yunqiu, who was still kneeling on the ground, stared stiffly at the intricate peony embroidery on the carpet, and even her breathing almost stopped. Sushang also stared at Siejin silently. In front of him, the young man trembled and held the wine cup, not daring to persuade or take it back, just standing there like a wooden sculpture. Until a faint sound of footsteps was heard outside, followed by a knock 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 on the door. Siejin frowned and said unhappily, "Who is the one who doesn't know how to live or die?" "It's me." Chu Nanyi's steady voice sounded, and he calmly pushed open the door of the private room and walked in. "Although it's a bit tactless to come here to disturb Juye's good things at this time, but if I know what's good for you, you will be in trouble." Siejin looked at him expressionlessly, and said with a sigh, "Please treat me to a drink another day, otherwise this matter will not be over." "No problem." Chu Nanyi said in a light tone, "Let Her Majesty the Queen condescend to invite you once, and the regent will accompany you. There are 108 delicacies in the palace for you to taste alone. The standard of this banquet should be enough to give face." Siejin glanced at him, stood up gracefully and calmly, and brushed his sleeves. "Juye has something to do and can't accompany the 2 guests. Chu Nanyi, you stay to entertain them. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered." Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 428. The carriage stopped at the entrance of the palace. Siejin turned and saw Mo Lingen, who was also getting off the carriage. He raised his eyebrows and said, "Are we two entering the palace together?" Mo Lingen was wearing a sapphire blue robe, holding a folding fan, and said gracefully, "It looks like it should be." Siejin frowned slightly and pondered for a moment. "I probably know why the Lord asked us to enter the palace." Mo Lingen was non-committal and chatted with him calmly. you go to a brothel to hang out with people at this late hour. What do you mean by hanging out? Siejin walked into the palace gate under the moonlight. I am here to do business. Amolingan said, tell me about it. Tonight, I took Duan Muyu and Suchang to Qingfeng Pavilion to see the world. Siejin said calmly, by the way, let Suchang see how the beautiful boy he sent receives guests in the brothel. Amolingan was shocked when he heard this, accepting guests. Siejin glanced at him sideways. Why, are you feeling distressed? I feel so bad. Amolingan frowned. Suchang is also the Prime Minister of South Vietnam after all. Aren't the several young men he brought here for the purpose of marrying Her Majesty the Queen? Although Your Majesty does not accept it, the status of those young men should be unusual, at least they are the sons of aristocratic families. That's right, you do this. Young master from aristocratic family, Siejin sneered, a serious young master from aristocratic family will learn the skills of serving others. Will he be good at charm? Amolingan's expression paused slightly. You mean, the boys brought by Suchang have all been specially trained? Nonsense, Siejin said indifferently, otherwise he came all the way to Dongling just to send two beauties to express his feelings. Is he full? Having said this, he turned his head and glanced at Amolingan. You won't tell me that you haven't got any news, right? If you are really derelict in your duty, I wonder if you need to relax recently. Amolingan shook his head. I have been very busy recently and have no time to pay attention to Suchang and his boy. What are you busy with? You don't have to worry about what you are busy with. Anyway, you are busy with big things, Amolingan said. Since you know that those teenagers are not safe, haven't you pulled out all the claws? Siejin said, when have you ever seen a mouse get an advantage from a cat? I have no interest in mice, and I don't care whether it can be obtained from cats, Amolingan said, but when will you change your arrogance and arrogance? You are like a peacock all day long. Wait. When you meet someone who can restrain you, let's see if you dare to be so arrogant. Who can defeat him? Siejin felt that the sentence itself was a joke. I guess I have to wait until the next life, he thought seriously and said honestly, I like the whole back garden and appreciate every flower in the garden, because they are all beautiful and unique. Peonies are as noble as peonies. Delicate and beautiful, chrysanthemums have the noble nature of chrysanthemums. They have their own advantages in spring, summer, autumn, and winter. I like to have both. It is really incomprehensible to me to give up the entire imperial garden for just one flower like the Lord did. He actually wanted to say it was a bit stupid. But as a subordinate, talking about his master behind his back was already disrespectful. If he bluntly said that his master was a fool, he was afraid that he would not survive until the sun rose tomorrow. Amolingan held his forehead, not knowing what to say. This monster will be punished sooner or later. All the young men sent by Suchang are proficient in the art of enchantment, and the eldest prince of the Yan kingdom brought by Duanwu has been planted with poison in his body. Siejin changed the topic and returned to a serious tone. The poison is called mother-child poison. In addition to achieving the purpose of controlling him, it also has the effect of charm. Poison and charm, Amolingan frowned. Are they planning to use these teenagers to gain the queen's favor and then achieve some ulterior motives? Obviously that's right, Siejin said, sighing, but I really can't understand what the emperors of northern Xinjiang and South Vietnam have in their minds. How dare they really use such stupid methods? Do they think that all Dongling court officials are idiots? Amolingan was silent for a moment and slowly shook his head. Have you ever thought about what if Her Majesty the Queen really took them into the harem? Siejin frowned. Your Majesty is very possessive and jealous. He does not allow anyone of the opposite sex to come close to His Majesty, even if they are famous or not. That's why those young men are in your hands, so you can know what charm skills they are good at, Amolingan said calmly, but if their plan succeeds, Wei Wuxian and the Nanya boys will naturally enter the harem. Don't think it's impossible. The queen has just ascended the throne. Under normal circumstances, the harem should be filled, let alone with the she has no reason to refuse things that other countries have good relations with. Therefore, if those young men were able to enter the harem, even if they did not have a high status, it would be easy to capture the love of a woman based on their extraordinary appearance and charm skills. The biggest miscalculation of South Vietnam and northern Xinjiang was that they did not expect that Rong Yu would still have a strong voice even after arriving in Tangling. The courtiers in Dongling were not hostile because of their foreign status. The queen and the regent were not alone in the court. They were not alone. You need to obey anyone's words and do things, you don't need to look at anyone's face, and you don't need to accept any form of coercion. That's why South Vietnam and northern Xinjiang failed to succeed. In fact, if the attitudes of the Prince Regent and Her Majesty the Queen were slightly weaker, those young men would already be vying for favor in the harem. What you said makes sense. Yejin nodded slowly. I plan to let these people be used by me. How to use it? These young men are all very beautiful, it would be a pity to discard them. Yejin smiled lightly. Their charm skills are not low, they must have received special training since they were young. If you want them to turn against us, just find their weak spots, give them a little deterrence, and then pinch their most concerned 7 inches. With both kindness and force, they will become the most docile pets in my hands. Mo Lingan was silent for a moment. Duan Mu Yu and Su Chang are unlucky to meet you. Xiejin smiled happily, thank you. The two chatted all the way. Let's go. When we arrived at Dajhan Palace, Xiejin couldn't help but speak when he saw Rong Yu. The moonlight is so beautiful tonight. Shouldn't the master be with His Majesty and have a romantic time? Why do we have to talk about business in the middle of the night? Nan 11 was leaning on the couch reading a book. Hearing this, she looked over and smiled gently. You were just plucked from the land of gentleness. Are you dissatisfied? Your Majesty knows me well. Xiejin stood in the outer hall and bowed gracefully, but although the land of gentleness is beautiful, I dare not be dissatisfied with the master. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbspeed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 429. Nan 11 smiled quietly and lowered her eyes to read. Does the Lord want us to disrupt the northern frontier's political situation? Mo Lingan stood in front of the huge sandalwood desk, watching Rong Yu flipping through the intelligence, and said thoughtfully, the northern frontier has been very active recently, frequently probing the borders, and it seems that there is an intention to increase troops for combat. The prince of the northern frontier came to Dongling this time. In addition to sending Wei Wuxuan, another purpose is to test Rong Yu's attitude and find out whether Rong Yu will return to the Great Zhou in the short term. If Rong Yu does not return, they will probably be eager to raise troops against the borders of the Great Zhou first. Dongling is far away from the Great Zhou. If the generals of the Great Zhou are unfortunately defeated, Dongling's distant water cannot save the nearby fire. It's a pity that although it is true that the northern frontier is brave and good at fighting, the brain structure is different from that of ordinary people. It is too easy to take it for granted. It has never thought that even if Rong Yu is not there, the Great Zhou will definitely not be their opponent. Besides, Dongling and Dazhu have been one family in reality for a long time. Even if Beijiang can gain some advantage temporarily, it will still have to pay a huge price in the end. Why bother? Isn't it good to live a peaceful life? Why do you have to seek death? Duan Mu Yu, the crown prince, has been doing so well that he has lost himself a little. Rong Yu's voice was indifferent, with a hint of chill. Send some news to Beijiang, let them know that Duan Muyu has received friendly hospitality in Dongling, and has had a good chat with the royal family of Dongling. In order to declare his friendship with Dongling, he has signed a 50-year alliance agreement with Dongling. Mo Ling was silent for a moment, his eyes fell on Rong Yu's noble and indifferent face. To what extent? To what extent can be achieved? It is best to let Beijiang be in civil strife for 10 years, Rong Yu said indifferently. In addition to Duan Muyu, there are 3 princes in Beijiang who are qualified to compete for the throne, and the power of their mothers is not weak. You notify the subordinates there, let them do their own work, secretly support these 3 princes, and thus weaken the power of the queen and her son. There is no need to do it all at once, take it slowly, and stretch the battle line. This king, what we want is not only to change the crown prince, but also to make them in a mess and have no time to care about other things. Mo Lingan nodded, yes. You can ask Qin Shu to send someone to Beijiang to pick up a few people. Xiejin walked to the table, his delicate eyebrows and eyes were cunning like a fox. Beijiang and Nanyu are plotting against Dongling. If we don't take action, it would be a bit of a shame for their good intentions. Mo Lingan tilted his head to look at him, as if he thought of something, and turned to look at Rong Yu. My lord, can the eldest prince of Yan state in Xiejin's hands be used? His mother is the concubine of the king of Yan state. Both mother and son are pawns in Duan Muyu's hands. We can turn the tables and let the pawns backfire. If the timing is right, maybe this unparalleled prince can compete for the throne of Yan state. Although Yan state is small, if it can be used well, it can become a weapon to restrain Beijiang. Xiejin nodded slowly. Wei Wuxian doesn't look as fragile and harmless as he looks. He can indeed be used. Rong Yu raised his eyes, are you sure? How can I be sure of dealing with a mere Wei Wuxian? Xiejin smiled lightly, don't worry, my lord. If there is any mistake, I will leave my life to you. I will fry or boil it without any complaints. This is a good way to deal with it. I happen to like fried food. Mo Lingan smiled, it will be more delicious if you sprinkle some cumin. Xiejin raised his eyebrows, are you not afraid of breaking your teeth? My teeth are not that fragile, Mo Lingan said, but then again, only you can think of such a perverted way of dealing with it. The Lord will at best beat you to death and drag your body out to feed the dogs. Xiejin's smile deepened, and he hooked his hand around his neck. Mo Lingan, you've been itching for skin recently, right? Do you want me to give you a whole set of skin and disassemble and reassemble your bones? Thank you for your kindness, but I don't need it. Mo Lingan took his hand away. If you are interested, you can go to the military camp to see how Xianyu Enyao trains soldiers. I guarantee you will have a chance to show your skills. Xianyu Enyao? Xiejin stroked his chin, thinking that although he knew that Yao was a military commander, he had not seen his heroic demeanor when training soldiers. If he had time, he could indeed go to the military camp to observe. This is all the details of the Su family in Nanyu. Rong Yu put a file in front of Xiejin, and said in a light voice, Su Chang is the prince of the old emperor of Nanyu who was exiled. This news can be revealed to the emperor of Nanyu. Xiejin and Mo Lingan were silent at the same time. As expected of his master, if he doesn't take action, it's fine. If he does, he will kill him with one move, leaving him no chance to breathe. Su Chang is the son of the previous emperor of Nanyu. Su Chang himself should know this, but the current emperor doesn't know it, so he trusts Su Chang very much. Although Su Chang can't be the emperor at the moment, an illegitimate prince who no one knows sits on the prime minister's seat and holds all the power in his hands. This is definitely not news that the emperor can sleep peacefully. Of course, Mo Lingan and Xiejin both know that Rong Yu's purpose is not just to deal with Su Chang. After all, the attitude of the prime minister of Nanyu represents the attitude of the emperor. Getting rid of a prime minister is not important, but using the emperor's hand to deal with Su Chang can achieve a lose-lose goal. The Su family is powerful and has deep roots. The emperor cannot destroy the Su family overnight. At least he has to ensure that the destruction of the Su family will not cause unrest in the court. So this move is equivalent to letting South Vietnam fight among itself, thereby weakening South Vietnam's strength. Rong Yu said calmly, "How is the health of the regent of Ziki recently?" Mo Lingan came back to his senses and said, "He has recovered a lot." "Then let Nanya go to war with Ziki," Rong Yu said calmly, as if he was deciding something insignificant. "The Jinxiu city that Nanya is eyeing can be used as bait." Mo Lingan pondered for a moment and nodded in response, "Yes, I know what to do." As for Siejin, Rong Yu's eyes turned slightly, "Have you been lingering in brothels recently and don't want to leave?" Siejin sighed, "Isn't this also for business?" "I'll give you 1 year to support Wei Wushuan to sit on the throne of Yangguo," Rong Yu said indifferently. "You can pry some things out of the mouths of the young men brought by Su Chang. This king wants Nanyu and Beijiang to be in turmoil within 10 years. Within 10 years? When Siejin heard this, he understood it in his heart and couldn't help sighing. It's a bit regrettable. Rong Yu wanted to keep the two countries busy and too busy to stir up trouble, but at the same time, it also meant that Dongling and Dezhou had no excuse to increase their troops to fight. His master really had no ambition to conquer the world. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 430. Nan 11 stayed in the inner hall reading, although not deliberately. She would occasionally stop to listen to Rong Yu and Siejin talking, and she couldn't help turning her head and quietly looking out the window. The quiet and soft moonlight cast a frosty white, and the pavilions and towers made of gold and jade were reflected in her eyes at this time, and she felt familiar. Carefully counting, she and Rong Yu had been in Dongling for a short time, only more than a month, but it felt like they had been integrated into this environment for a long time, without any sense of unfamiliarity. Rong Yu could easily get started with the people here and the important affairs of the court in Dongling, without time to adapt, and even without a sense of being at a loss. Even if some ministers in the court still had some strange thoughts, they were restrained because of Rong Yu's thunderous actions. In addition, since he had not been to court for these days, the court officials had not really discussed matters with Rong Yu, and there had not been too strong disagreements for the time being, so it seemed that everything was calm. And she, under the protection of Rong Yu, became the most noble woman in the world, but she didn't have to worry about anything. She rested all day long to take care of the baby, eat and drink well, and he shielded her from the wind, rain, frost, and snow outside. Everyone knew that Rong Yu was a man who was so powerful that he could not be surpassed or defeated. All those who knew him, whether they were his subordinates or enemies, knew his strong strength and arrogant and cold temperament. His subordinates respected him and submitted to him, and his opponents feared him and wanted to get rid of him. However, at the same time, how many people took it for granted that such a man should take control of the world, take all the prosperity of the country, and realize the ambition of eternal great cause. But really, Rong Yu really didn't have such an idea at all. Nan 11 silently held his chin, thinking that if Beijiang and Nanya could have a civil war for 10 years, no one in Dongling would come to disturb them for at least 10 years. In addition to Beijiang, Nanyu and Dazhu, there was still Ziki left as a powerful country in the world. Ziki is also in a state of internal turmoil. The regent and the young emperor are fighting against each other. In the end, it is unknown whether the young emperor will take power smoothly or the regent Lin Ao will succeed in usurping the throne. But undoubtedly, this will also take time. The four major powers have been restrained, and other countries dare not act rashly. As for 10 years later, Nan 11 raised her lips and smiled lightly. Even if those countries have resolved the internal turmoil 10 years later, I am afraid that they will have been left far behind by Dongling and Dazhu in terms of strength. Well, in fact, they have already left far behind, but they themselves don't know it yet. Time passed little by little. Rong Yu's indifferent and calm voice came from the outer hall. In a calm tone, he made meticulous arrangements. Siejin and Amolingan accepted the orders one by one, respectfully and fearfully. That voice was cold, and there was no trace of emotional fluctuations. There was no tenderness when children were in love, no tenderness when facing Nan 11, no paranoid arrogance when jealous, and no joy or uneasiness shown in front of the beloved woman. Only calm and stern, making people fear and submit to the powerful pressure. Even Siejin, who was arrogant and unruly in the eyes of the nobles, did not dare to be too presumptuous in front of him. Nan 11 smiled lightly and looked at her tender white palm. She would dream from time to time these 2 nights, dreaming about the past things intermittently. When her memory gradually recovered, she found that the entanglements in her heart seemed to be less and less. The memories of the past life and the present life were intertwined, sometimes confused, unable to distinguish between reality and dreams, and sometimes she could clearly feel the woman's emotions in the dream. It was as if she was Dan Shu, and Rong Yu was the paranoid boy who could not get love. Speaking of it, there was nothing to worry about. In that life, they did not really learn to love, and were not good at expressing emotions, so they made some mistakes being in the position of everyone's attention. While getting great glory, the mistakes would be infinitely magnified. The obsession of unrequited love is engraved into the bone marrow, and death cannot eliminate the obsession. This is true for you Rong Huijin, and it is also true for you Danchu. Past life and present life, after reincarnation. This person paid a huge price that others could not imagine, in exchange for the continuation of their relationship in this life. His pain, hesitation, and uneasiness are all because of the memories he once had. And she is enjoying the wealth and glory he has exchanged for flesh and blood, and the rich greenhouse he has built after thousands of hardships, but the memory is covered, so the sorrow of the previous life seems to have been far away from her. He never mentioned the pain he had suffered. He was unwilling to take credit, unwilling to show weakness and beg for mercy, unwilling to use scars to make her feel distressed, and unwilling to cause her any pressure. Even if he is paranoid, he will always hurt himself. As the memory becomes clearer and clearer, Nan 11 always thinks these 2 days that she has always been a selfish person. In the previous life, because the country could not give him complete love, before she died, she only wished to be a woman without great ambitions in the next life, and it would be enough to grow old with him, but this love was finally earned by his efforts. He was confused and uneasy because of the non-existent dream. Although he knew that if there was no dream, she, a heartless man who had long lost her memory, would experience a disaster, he never tried to defend himself. In this relationship, he was the one standing at the bottom from beginning to end, humbly longing for her love. All his efforts were ignored as if it was nothing worth taking to heart, but a mortal man, even after reincarnation, he is still just a man, not a god. As a mortal man, who can go through so much suffering and pain, and have no regrets even if his head is broken and bloody? Who can leave bloody marks on the thorny road, but still move forward fearlessly towards the goal without any intention of retreating? Who can keep a woman in his heart for decades, carefully cherishing her, and hiding all the pain and fatigue alone? Nan 11 was immersed in distant thoughts, and did not even notice Rong Yu coming to her side. 11er Rong Yu looked at her with his eyes down. What are you thinking about? The familiar voice drilled into her eardrums, and Nan 11 came back to her senses, slowly raised her head, and looked at the man who was close at hand. The familiar outline seemed to overlap with the previous life. Rong Yu, she frowned and said, thinking of something very important, compared to our previous lives, haven't our appearances changed much? Rong Yu was startled. He didn't expect her to suddenly bring up the past. After a moment of silence, he said, well, not much has changed. Then will the people of Dongling feel familiar when they see us? How could that be? Rong Yu seemed a little surprised. They haven't seen us 200 years ago. Nan 11 was silent for a moment. There should be a portrait. Rong Yu was startled again. A portrait? He shook his head slowly. All the portraits are destroyed.